Good evening and welcome. It's always nice to see a room full of parents and students. Welcome to this meeting of the Board of Education, January 10th. This Board of Education has been in closed session since 6 p.m. this evening for the purposes of a student residency hearing and collective negotiations. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I will note that we have 5 of our 7 board members present. 2 have fallen ill. The sickness that's going around town has taken 2 of our board members home in bed, and we're happy to have them home in bed recuperating and not sharing with all of us. We miss them, but we will proceed. The best part of sitting at the board table is we get to recognize students who have done outstanding work, and we're very happy to recognize students from time to time. This evening, we have some students that are in our performing arts program. Mr. Pernod, would you like to do a little introduction?
Yes, I believe... Mr. Berg is here, and he has come forward for the middle school students who have some outstanding musical achievement awards. Congratulations, students. Mr. Berg, I'm going to call on you, and you can fill in and declare the proclamation that you...
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Gotcha. Good evening, members of the board, district staff, and Elmhurst community. On behalf of the Elmhurst Community Unit School District 205 Music Department, it is my honor and my privilege to introduce our Illinois Music Educators Association Junior Festival participants for 2011. First, I'd like to introduce our music staff, many of whom are joining us this evening, who've worked with these students over the past year. From Bryan, Ellen Gary, Jessica Cross, Nancy Flanagan, myself, Mr. Jeffrey Harold. From Churchville, Barbara Scott, Cindy Krause, Lindsay Sickinger. And from Sandburg, Stephanie Ferraci, Ricardo Vesquez, Heather Knight, John Gaunt, and Kim Lambert-Hack. Each year, the Illinois Music Educators Association hosts the Junior Festival event for middle school students who excel in woodwinds, brass, percussion, and string instruments, and voice. Students audition to participate in the festival. Band, orchestra, choir, and jazz band. Selected students then spend a morning and an afternoon rehearsing together in one of these 4 ensembles under the direction of a distinguished conductor, clinician, and present a joint concert in the afternoon. Similar IMEA events are held in 9 separate geographical regions of the state during the same time period. On October 1st, Bryan Middle School hosted the IMEA Junior Festival auditions for Region 1 students, for about approximately 1,200 students from across the Southwest Chicago Joliet region. District 205 staff, parents, and student volunteers generously donated many of their hours of time to help the event run smoothly. These volunteers helped set up audition areas, move equipment, monitor rooms, provide information and assistance to guests, serve refreshments, clean up, and reset classrooms. Feedback from IMEA leadership and participating directors and students was uniformly complimentary and appreciative of our efforts. The volunteers from our community who helped facilitate this event are to be commended. The IMEA District 1 Junior Festival was held Saturday, November 5th, 2011 at Riverside Brookfield High School in Riverside, Illinois. The 3 ensembles presented an outstanding joint performance in the early evening for a capacity audience in the field house. The jazz band presented a performance the following week. I'm very proud to present the following Elmhurst 205 students who were selected into the IMEA Region 1 Junior Festival Honor Band, Orchestra, Choir, and Jazz Band. And I would like all the students who are participating this evening to come up here and form a semicircle in front of the table, and the board will read the proclamation.
What a great group of students we have in front of us. First of all, I want to congratulate Mr. Berg and the entire team of that we have, large team that is helping deliver excellent instruction and coaching and experiences for our young middle school students. I personally have a child who has gone through the middle school instrumental music program. These students are getting up very early in the morning. They are at school long before school starts, missing the sleep, but I don't think it's beauty sleep that you're missing. You look all pretty sharp. But these students are clearly demonstrating that they are very committed to a broad education. They're getting exposed to the arts, and they're having great instruction. And I think one of the other benefits is working as an ensemble, working with a group and learning how to get along and take direction from their directors and turn that into something that is really incredibly beautiful. I'm very impressed with our instrumental music program, and these children have gone above and beyond. And many, I'm sure, are taking private lessons, spending more time, and are competing. And they're representing us very well. So Mr. Collins is up here to help me as well. Jim, did you want to make a quick comment, or we're good? Jim is going to help me hand out because we have proclamations. It's the custom of the board that we recognize students who have achieved exemplary achievements. And so we have a proclamation that I'm going to get to read and try to read all the names correctly. And then we have a recognition that can be stored at all three of the middle schools that recognizes these students. So without further ado, do you want to just go ahead and hand them out as I'm...
Sure. Are you ready?
That would be great. Thank you. Whereas the Illinois Music Educators Association Junior Festival, held in November, recognizes middle school students for their musical accomplishments. And whereas this program encourages excellence on the part of individual students and encourages further music study and artistry. And whereas Bryan Middle School students, Caitlin Cadigan, soprano voice, Ciccarone, tenor voice, Michael Griffin, trombone, Alexis Homan, flute, Christopher Irby, bass, Hannah Kikos, cello, Robert Kildow, clarinet, Marissa Krilich, violin, Tatum Langley, alto voice, Ella Lee, violin, Brooke Morenz, alto voice, Michael Seaborg, trumpet, and Kevin Sheehan, cello. And whereas Churchville Middle School students, Kristen Drost, soprano voice, Andrew French, bass, Caroline Stasica, violin, and Brian Strock, French horn. And whereas Sandburg Middle School students, Eileen Baird, soprano voice, Catherine Bartos, soprano voice, Henry Braun, alto saxophone, Rachel Catalano, cello, Amy Choi, flute, Stephanie Sway, violin, Jessica DePaul, soprano voice, Caitlin Kolasecki, viola, Stephen Kryenbuhl, bass voice, Caitlin Cundy, alto voice, Olivia Martins, oboe, Catherine Mitchell, soprano voice, Emily Patterson, soprano voice, Daniel Stumpf, trombone, Michael Stumpf, trumpet, that must be a very loud house, Benton Udenberg, tuba, and Leah Widmeyer, violin, were selected to play in an honor ensemble along with some of the most accomplished student musicians in the region. And whereas Churchville Middle School student Andrew French on the bass was also selected to play in the Jazz Festival, held 1 week later on November 12th. And whereas these accomplishments bring pride and prestige to Bryan, Churchville, and Sandburg Middle Schools, to District 205, and to the community. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education and Administration of Elmhurst Community Unit School District 205 express congratulations to these students, their parents, and their teachers for this outstanding accomplishment. Okay, students, if you want to just turn around and shake the hand of the board member that you see We like to congratulate the students personally, so thank you for coming. Thank you, and congratulations again to all of our students and parents. School is back in session, and so we'll take just a quick minute here if you would like to get your students home so they can go home and practice some more, or maybe work on some homework. But congratulations again, and we will resume in a minute. Thank you. Okay, thank you. If we move on to the remainder of our agenda, Mr. Pernod, actually, before we move on to the next agenda item, Mr. Pernod has an announcement that he would like to make.
Yeah, I want to put this in just because it's another recognition, and we just received the word just this afternoon. The Illinois Student Assistant Commission recently recognized 17,000 students from 773 different high schools across the state as the 2012-2013 Illinois State Scholars. And the Illinois State Scholar winners rank in the top 10% of the high schools. Selection is based on the ACT, SAT, and Prairie Achievement, and is the high school counselors, in conjunction with Illinois State Assistants, determine the winners. And congratulations, we have 128 of our York students who have been recognized in that group. So we will bring them back with their names, but I just thought it was important that we recognize that this evening. So thank you.
Thank you. That is very good news. We're very happy to hear that. This meeting tonight is actually a workshop meeting, and what that means is that we have topics that we need to discuss and research and have some good, healthy discussion around. It also gives the public an opportunity at a particular point in time. We welcome input on a particular topic. So we have two workshop discussion topics that we're going to discuss tonight. First is mission and vision statement that we've been working on. Second is a review of the committee structure that the board has put in place. So we'll begin with one, and once we're finished with the board discussion on mission and vision, if you have something that you would like to add to the conversation, a comment, you're welcome to come up to the microphone and ask a question or provide some commentary. So, Mr. Pernod, I think we're going to start with mission and vision statements.
Yes, if the board remembers, we had developed a tentative new vision and mission statement that we had discussed at a previous board meeting, and at that point, the Board of Education was interested in community feedback on those vision and mission statements. So I was assigned the task of gathering that input. We gathered the input in a variety of ways. We had posted the vision and mission on our website and asked for community feedback. I met with students at York High School on a couple of occasions to discuss the vision and mission. We put it out to staff and solicited staff input. We asked principals to talk about it at a staff meeting and have the teachers direct that input back to the Board of Education. So this evening you have received a summary of all of those comments related to the vision and mission statement. So this evening I thought we could start by having the board just discuss their reaction to some of the community, student, staff input that you received on the vision and mission, and from that make some comments about what you believe our next steps would be in establishing vision and mission as we move forward in this process. So with that, I think we could just open it up. I know board members have been looking at those comments from community members, parents, and students, and so I think teasing out some common themes and what the opinions were will probably be helpful and just a starting point for the discussion. So with that, I'll open up to board members.
And then we think the results of this kind of discussion would go back to the Board Improvement Committee for further work, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so anybody like to start?
We had a pretty good discussion in the committee. About this, and there seemed to be a feeling that the one consensus was that we shouldn't rush this thing and that we should take the time necessary to do it right because it is foundational to the to the whole strategic planning process. There seems to be a difference of opinion from what I can see in the comments that the whole concept of achieving beyond your dreams seems to, from my opinion, provide the biggest basis for comment. And there seems to be two schools of thought, people saying we should stay away from that, and people that say it's a good course, maybe we should adjust it up or down to give it a little more connection to the ground. So we've talked about it enough. I'd like to hear some of the response of the non-committee members to add that into the mix.
The other main comment that we discussed in our committee was it was the dreams, the word dreams, that provided the most feedback. And then the other part that provided the most feedback from the community was about being a national leader. And it seemed like there were more people than not. I mean, we got 18 responses back. So we're talking about, N equals 18. But more so than not, that was not something that people really like to say. We should have it be about students' growth, student achievement, and if we do things right, then being a national leader will take care of itself. So that was something that I noticed right away from the comments.
Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I too drew out dreams and national leaders being the two hot button areas. I think the feedback was great. I'm glad the public took the time to give it to us. I think that understanding why we're doing this is important. I think we got a few of you guys are spending a bunch of time, not sure how this fits. But if you're going to do it, this is how we're going to do it. But I think understanding the connection between this and then the next level of work we're doing around strategy, goals, objectives, and things like that. I think when you talk about what dreams mean, we can wordsmith this. But when we talk about dreams and empowerment and some of the other things that are in here, those start to be more defined. And I think that the comments will help us when we get to that level, more defined when we talk about our goals and objectives. And the more concrete, the more specific, they give more meaning to some of the terms that may have multiple connotations when you're reading them. So I think that I think that we're not that far apart on kind of what we're trying to say. The specifics are what we're getting kind of caught up in, and I'm comfortable with however we want to wordsmith this. I'm focused on then how we then turn this into concrete goals and objectives that we can start pursuing, and I think that that's where some of the definition will come in. Maybe it'll make more sense in that context when we get to that point.
I mean, there are people far more skilled at wordsmithing than I am. I guess my suggestion is we have that discussion within your committee and see if we can incorporate the suggestions. I mean, one suggestion that stood out to me is that within this statement, we say we want to be a national leader in education. And I think somebody pointed out that we're not a statewide leader in education. So, that's a good point. But nevertheless, I mean, I think these are aspirational statements. And they should help our staff and our board with direction when we have a decision to make about two courses of action, which one will lead us to becoming a leader in education, whether that's nationally or it's statewide. Maybe we can incorporate, maybe we can tone that aspiration down a little bit, revise it once we achieve are what we come up with and go from there.
Yeah, I just had a question too, just past history. It's too bad Susan can't be here, but national leaders in our current vision statement. Elmhurst Community Unit School District 205 will be a national leader in educating children, and then it goes on about 3 more lines. So that's in our current vision. Is there, maybe we should, bring this up in the next committee meeting with Susan there, what was the history there? How did that become part of the vision back in, I think this was 07 or 08?
Yeah, I was attending board meetings, but it was honestly, most of this was facilitated by an outside firm that did all this. So I was sitting in the audience watching proceedings, and now I'm on the other side of the table, but I can't recall. We would have to go back to Susan. It was the strategic plan, the whole thing was put together by ECRA in 08, and it was adopted in December of 08. So I did have a couple of things that were themes that I kind of teased out from the comments that we did receive. I agree, concur with the national leader part. It wasn't very popular. And I think I agree and I understand the sentiment that we're not setting out to be a national leader. That's not really our goal. Our goal is to help our students be very successful, and that will follow, hopefully, if we do things very well. The couple of things that I noted that might not have been everybody, but there were a couple of references to, they appreciated it, the inclusion of character and citizenry and social responsibility, kind of the whole child aspect, which I kind of like as well. The dreams was not so popular, and I kind of have a problem with defining the dreams too. The thing that I thought was, one thing that I really enjoyed was the mom rule. If have your mom read it and see if your mom reads it. If your mom, who's not grossly engaged in the education world, and if you can hand it to your mom. Or my daughter said, let me read it, and I'm not really sure I understand what all this means, a student. So I think, whatever the final product is, if you can pass the mom test and the student test, I think that's something that is a good way to give some perspective to it. And then finally, the thing that I struggled with was, what is our focus? Is it student-focused? Is it employee-focused? Is it taxpayer-focused? Because I don't know that, we did receive one comment that said, I'm not sure that this reflects, what I'm looking for as a taxpayer living in this community that I would like to see. So I think just defining our audience for the vision and the mission, and having it be child-centered, or having it be as a governmental entity in which every citizen contributes, and we work with our raw materials and we produce, hopefully, well-educated, engaged citizens. So just kind of from a little bit, what view? Does it pass muster, and is it something that everybody, all of our audiences, could find some connection with? I thought that was an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, I guess a common theme that I read in a lot of the public comment is, I also like the mom rule a lot. And I think if you combine the mom rule and the T-shirt rule, you'll, that if you're wearing it on a T-shirt and you walk past mom, she understands what your vision is, because it's not so complex because you can fit it on a T-shirt. That I think Mr. Pernod's former district had something that passed that rule, frankly. It was catchy, it was clear, and it was very simple. So maybe that should be our goal, is to make it simple enough that people can remember it, and it conveys a very strong sentiment without being too wordy. So I would take that to your committee to make that your first goal.
For both vision and mission.
I think mission can be a little longer than vision. I mean, mission is how to get there, how you're going to achieve your vision. So obviously, that's a little bit more grounded. It's a little bit more detailed. It's a little bit more concrete. So I think that could be a few sentences long. And, beyond that, I mean, this is one of those things that when you see it, you got it, but it's hard to describe how to get there.
I think the vision is something that everybody should be able to relate to. And in the voice of a teenager, you know, is this something that you're going to use every day, Mom, or is this going to sit on a shelf? You know, you lay out the rule that you say this is going to be the rule, and then you never follow it. You know, this is something that I think, and chime in, but I think that this newly seated board really believes that what it is that we want to put out there is something that we want to live by. We want the board to live by it. We want our teachers and staff. We want our students. We want our parents. We want everybody to really get on board with and see how we're working towards a real vision for what we're trying to accomplish. The mission can be a little more instructive in terms of the how and kind of reflect a little bit of the values of whether their character, you know, hardworking, how aspirational we're going to be. I don't know.
A couple things. We got two challenges here. One is to deal with the dream issue.
Right.
No historical references. And my feeling about that is DREAM does two things. First of all, the fact that so many people talked about it in two different ways shows that there's not really a consensus about it. And if we stay with DREAM, I think we're not looking. We want something everybody buys into. The other part about DREAM, and the comments seem to focus on DREAM, and only a couple of them got to those other very powerful words in that vision statement, which is empower, which is really important. And the other part is achieve. And DREAM, by being a bigger issue, seems to have taken away from those two other words. And so my inclination is to keep that structure of that and find something other than DREAM or other than beyond that is something that we can more coalesce around and bring out the importance of those other two words. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to comment on that quickly. There were several community members who were willing to put forth. They did the work. They rewrote for us or gave us some suggestions. One of them is for the vision of Elmhurst District 205 is empowering all our students to achieve their highest individual growth and achievement. I mean, maybe, so I would encourage the committee to go back through the detail. There might be some chaining of words or some impetus that might help you come up with the wording.
Yeah, I just have two quick things. One is I think it should be catchy, like what you just said. I like all those words, but it's not a real catchy phrase. The other thing, too, is if we're going to live with these statements and really use them, not put them on a shelf, then we do need to slow down a little bit because we're going to have our district performance indicators finalized in June. And we need to connect our mission and vision with those district performance indicators. So in order to have the mission and vision be used, then the indicators need to be finalized.
Can your committee take the suggestions that we have received from the community, come up with some maybe multiple choice options? But again, I keep going to Mr. Pernod's old district that I think I can pretty much recite that your old vision statement or mission statement to within a few words, and I can't even recite what our old one is. So the idea of being repetitive, let's call it catchy, easy to remember, but clear in the statement, is ever so important, because if you can't remember it, you can't live up to it.
I can't remember his.
Is it a college?
I believe it's college ready, career ready, life ready. So, I'd say that conveys a strong, simple message.
Okay. Mr. Boone, would you like to add anything? You good?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking out loud, and the question, you're talking about performance indicators, but I mean, there's a bunch of stuff going on. We're trying to run it in parallel, and I'm trying to think about, this really comes to life for me again in the objectives and the goals that we're going to set for the district, and that's going to be an exercise we're going to do in, I think, June. And my question is should we keep pushing this along, but should we be thinking about this as a package when it comes out, where we finalize the mission, the vision, but we also have the goals and objectives next to it, so that there's some, more definition, where then when we communicate this, it becomes, much more readily understood. And I don't know whether that's the right answer or not. I'm just, as I'm hearing all these things moving around, the understanding in the context of all these things fitting together is really where it comes from. So I'd throw that out there.
Dave, from your experience, I mean, is how important do you think the timing is? Should we attempt to have a timeline where we roll this all out together, or is that less important?
I think there's benefits to both. I think in the fact that we're struggling a little bit to come up with a vision and mission, it might be a positive to wait a while and see, as we develop district performance indicators and it's more defined as to the strategic plan and what is going to be in there, to then come back and review vision and mission in relation to that and where you are. Board members may have a better vision of where that vision statement should be at that point. And so maybe that's the more prudent approach to this. And just, I don't think it's critical that we come up with a new vision mission right now. I think at some point, though, I think you're going to want to at least coalesce about a vision and mission for the school district. But there may be benefit in holding off and slowing this process down a little bit and then waiting and seeing what we have right now. I have a feeling you're probably closer than you think, but I think it's going to take some time and to look at all the aspects of this from a district-wide perspective. So,
I think maybe one other idea is that we're looking to have all of our performance indicators set by June, but we're going to be in committees discussing, what categories are we looking at, what within those categories, what types of things, and I'm hoping that we have some good process discussion about how we're going to assimilate around what we think are core things that we want to measure and monitor. So I think, don't want to put it on the back burner and not think about it, but I think it's thinking about it and including it as part of the discussion in our committees as we're talking about performance indicators and curriculum in all the different areas. So, I think that could help us narrow it down as well. So, Shannon, do you think you have enough to take back to the committee to kind of... Any other board members want to add anything else on this part of the conversation? Okay, I will open it up.
I was just going to say, well, our committee meeting will be January 26th.
Okay.
It's about 2 weeks, so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. This is a workshop meeting, and this is a workshop agenda item. So if there's anybody who has real strong feelings about the discussions that we've had so far on mission and vision, clearly we're not ready to decide on those this evening. But if you'd like to have input, raise your hand, come on up to the podium. Seeing no takers, we will move on to our next agenda item. You can always email superintendent@elmhurst205.org or any of the individual board members as well for feedback. When you get the aha moment in the middle of the night and you can tell us exactly what you think we should say. Okay, moving on to our next agenda item. Mr. Pernod, would you like to kind of kick this off a little bit?
Yes, the other workshop item we have this evening is to talk about the board committee structure that we established at the beginning of this year. We are halfway through the school year, and we had decided in the retreat workshop that we had in August, I believe, that as we develop this new structure for the Board of Education and having board committees, that we would spend some time initially and have a discussion and evaluation of the positives and the improvement areas and overall how the board committee structure was working for the board. I understand we haven't been under the board structure that long, relatively speaking. I think most of the committees have met 4, maybe 5 times. But I think it's a good opportunity to at least do a check of where we are with the committee structure and how the board's feeling about the committee structure, what areas are working, what areas are not working. working. So as a result of that, I put together a survey that I asked board members to give us feedback and then bring that back. And we sent that summary survey results to you today. And so you can see not only the evaluation of the structure, but also board members' comments about the structure. So again, I think it's kind of the same format as we just had with vision and mission. I think the board probably, as you read those, had some maybe aha moments or some ideas of where we should go with the board structure, what's working, what's not working, and that feedback is going to be important to us to start working at. I would suggest too, and I thought of this earlier in the day, at some point we may want to also have a survey to the cabinet members who are co-chairing and involved in the committee structure, because part of it is it has to work for them too. It's a two-way street here, and I'll take responsibility for that. I didn't think of that until I woke up this morning about 7 o'clock and said probably should have done that too. So at some point, I think it's important that we survey my cabinet and see what's working from their side, what's not working, and go from there. So we'll send them an anonymous survey in the future.
If you guys are comfortable, I encourage you to join in to the conversation as we start talking about things. And if we go down a path that you just go, I just can't live with that, please, you own this as well as the board members. So I encourage you to hit that little magic button and contribute when you feel the need. So we're going to, again, do this very loosely. We have a lot of feedback from all 7 board members. We had several questions to answer in terms of effectiveness in moving the board forward, the district agenda forward, how this reflects the priorities of our board, which we kind of teased out in our first 3 meetings when we met as a new board in June, how effective the agendas and the discussions have been, how effective overall the committee structure is in the use of our time as a board member, and what areas we feel a need to improve the committee structure. So I don't want to go through each question, but those were the questions the way that we were approaching this. So anybody who has something they'd like to start with, tee it up.
I'll start this time. There were some great comments in there. I personally am very happy with the structure. I think it leverages our group. I think we've had a lot to do. I think one of the comments made too is that we're all new and necessarily we're probably front end loading a lot of the work here because there's a lot of foundational work that we have to do in establishing, but also kind of clearing the backlog stuff. But a couple comments on my side. One, I view this. Making sure we have that cabinet direction, that cabinet involvement. Hopefully what we're here to do, the ultimate ownership, I think, of progress is Dave and his cabinet, and we're here as a resource for the cabinet to, I think we started this out as being a sounding board for them as far as issues that come up and things that you want to talk about. You want to kind of preview the board on, and then some of the more administrative things that we want to knock off in committee so that we can spend more strategic time at the board table. But just making sure that those agendas are driven equally by the cabinet as by us. I think we get a lot of inbound. We get a lot of ideas. We wake up at 2 a.m. with flashes of brilliance, and we throw those onto a sheet. But we want to make sure. I just want to make sure that the cabinet understands that. You guys were partners in this. So raise your hand and make sure that this is being effective for what you're needing it for as well. Second, I think most of the comments come around kind of that committee to board table link. And, we're new. We're figuring this out. And I think that what we talked about, and I like the agenda the way it's structured today, where each board committee kind of has a slot. We don't mean to rehash everything at the board table, but given an opportunity to give a preamble, a brief overview of what it was, some of the rationale, some of the things that were discussed, kind of the executive summary of kind of what went on when it comes to a recommendation that's coming into the board. The other part of that, too, is I think there was a suggestion for kind of a dashboard or issues list or kind of what are the 5 to 7 key things. Well, on our committee, it's probably 28, but that we're working on, so that there's a quick the other board members can look and say, if they get a question about something, say, yeah, that committee, it is on their agenda. They are looking at it. I feel comfortable that it's not getting lost, it's not falling through the cracks. And if they want more information, they can pick up the phone and call one of us. But I think that's an interesting kind of dashboard, is kind of what's on the plate. The other piece of that too, though, is making sure that all the discussions are in committee. That feeling that when we sit down at the table, everybody brings what they want to talk about, and it's a free. It's not. Think about politically correct way to say it's been no sidebars and none of the other stuff that's going on with the administration. I mean, in that. It is about us, if we've got an issue, bringing this in front of, these aren't single individual agendas. I've had this conversation with a number of folks that have asked for, will you go talk to Charles about something? And I said, well, no, that's not, I'm not talking, that's a curriculum committee issue. That's an issue that should be discussed within that committee. I'm not going to put anything on Charles's plate that the committee isn't, governing kind of what that is. And so just making sure that we adhere to kind of that discipline. And then the last piece was just a suggestion. I would advocate 2-year terms. Just kind of even with the board election cycle. 'Cause I just think I'm looking at what we've done so far this year. And granted, it's the first year and it's a tough year, but I think to be effective, you're just getting up the curve and up to speed on kind of what's going on. You're starting to get into a rhythm with the administration. I think 1 year is too short. And I think that, with each seating of a new board would probably be the best way to reconfigure a committee. Or take a look at reconfiguring a committee at that time. So that would be my only other suggestion.
I think the committees have been great for building relationships and getting to know each other. We have so many new people on the board and in the administration, so I think it's been great for relationship building, getting to know each other. Also, it's been really good for alignment between the board and the administration. It's a way that the board can represent the community, the administration can represent the district, and we can just have a good discussion, good robust discussions about topics. So I think it's been great for really some deeper discussions. And also, one of the issues, though, is a lot of issues have come down to timing. Like, for instance, the curriculum committee meeting was last Wednesday, and then draft minutes were put out Monday morning, so then some of the board members don't get to see those draft minutes, and now here we are at a board meeting Tuesday night, and then the attachments to those minutes are not posted yet. So it's a timing thing too, like when the committee meeting is so close to a board meeting. So I guess we need to do a better job at the board meeting, just maybe taking a little more time to go through the draft minutes, even if they're not approved, just to bring all the board members up to speed. The other thing, I think that's it for now. I'm sure I'll think of more as you.
I agree with you, Shannon. Having the committee reports even if they're just draft, on the agenda is really helpful.
Posted.
And it gives you that weekend beforehand to look at them, to look at other things, just, figure out what kind of.
Even the committee didn't get them till Monday morning.
Right.
So we'll just, Dave, can we post draft minutes for the whole board?
Yeah, depending on how much time we have between the committee meeting and when we have to post, because we have to usually post those minutes by Friday to make it effective. If you're saying you need those by the weekend, if I have a Thursday committee meeting, then we'll just have to get the word out. Minutes have to be put together and done. The other problem is the minutes are being taken by the administration. So we're going to have to carve out some time to be able to do that. And I'm not sure with some of the schedules for cabinet members that might not be always possible given some of their other responsibilities and duties that they have, especially, again, if you have a Thursday night meeting, to get that out if there's a board meeting that next week. But we can certainly look at how we can speed up that process and maybe look at how we schedule those committee meetings so there is some time between when the committee meets and when the upcoming board meeting is coming. That maybe should be a factor that we look at.
I will. Oh, pressed the wrong button. It was the priority button. I never knew that existed. I guess I was saying this was a priority. Sorry about that.
When you do that, the volume goes up about 10 notches, too. So
I'm sorry. I'll never do it again. I did wanted to say we have a rebel in the group because now for the Curriculum and Instruction Committee, actually, we have a board member doing the minutes.
Oh, that's right.
So we again, it's new. We're still figuring it out, and we have some minor inconsistencies, and we're learning through it. So that just means, Shannon, that you got to stay up that night and write the minutes. And
But Shannon,
yeah.
what's so time sensitive? I mean, my question is just to the extent that there's something that needs to be acted upon at the board meeting, sure. I mean, I get the time sensitivity, but if you have a meeting on a Thursday, board meeting's on Tuesday, typically 2 weeks later we're going to meet again. Does it just not show up on that next meeting? If there's something that we need to know, let's talk about it. But, I mean, is there a reason why you need to create the accelerated deadline?
Well, I was just reading through the committee, the survey that was some of the complaints about sharing information in a timely manner and having board members ready for the next board meeting.
I think probably we should just stay away from Thursday committee meetings and try to get a full week in there so that we can get a tentative minutes in on the agenda. That would be an important thing to me. I don't want to change the topic. Maybe I do. But the thing that was attractive to me in the committee structure is the opportunity to have the public closer to the process of creating these ideas as opposed to coming to the board meeting and seeing them happen at the end. That being said, we have not had the public attendance, at least on the two committees I sit on, nor participation. One of the things I understood we were going to do is afford a little more participation of, the public and staff. Well, staff obviously has been a lot more participation, but the public has not attended. So I guess I'd kind of like to throw it out there to the public to please come to our committee meetings. Please, this is your opportunity to give your input. Am I speaking out of turn? I thought that's one of the things that we were trying to accomplish with the committee structure. But I would like to see that happen.
we did actually have community members come to a couple of the curriculum meetings. I think, honestly, John, I think this is an education thing. I think not everybody is aware that not everybody watches us quite as closely as we might like to believe from time to time. But I think it's kind of an education thing. And I also think we kind of started the committees, over summer break, and it wasn't established in our April meeting where we say, here's the meeting dates for the rest of the year. We've made a pretty big change to the way that we operate. So I want to say I think we could do a little bit better job in terms of providing some education and awareness of kind of the way that we operate. But I don't know that I was ready to do that until we really kind of figured out what we were doing with committees ourselves. So I think that we could definitely encourage, of course, they're open meetings, they're published, they're posted. Our agendas are posted. We do a pretty good job, I think, of posting minutes, so you don't even need to necessarily attend the meeting to kind of capture what was discussed. So I think I agree with you. We could absolutely improve community engagement, but I think it's still the benefit, for me personally, the benefits of having that small group discussion and a free and open discussion and a little bit earlier in the process far outweighs the transparent. We do need to make sure we're careful with our minutes for transparency's sake, but.
To kind of take this to at a high level, before I ran for the Board of Education, if you were to ask me, what does the Board of Education do? I would have described to you exactly what we're doing in these committee meetings. We are bringing the community's values as elected representatives to our school administration. And we are linked more tightly than my observation in any point in history in the Elmhurst schools. The board is linked more tightly to the administration than ever before. And I think we've all said we have a lot of operational issues since this is a new practice for the board. I'm kind of curious from the administration's point of view is where do you see the value proposition between understanding what we as kind of the community representatives want versus getting in your way of achieving progress?
Jim, that's a loaded question.
There was a
How is
tough
that
setup.
You don't have to-
Charles, how is that for a loaded question? Can you rate that on a 1 to 10 scale, please?
They're waiting for the anonymous feedback.
Squirrel.
We don't
Sacrificial lamb, anyone?
I'll step up. Yeah, I have to say that in terms of understanding the context of the district and prevailing issues in the district that have been around for an extended period of time, that having a subcommittee structure has been invaluable. And that there's been a number of things of which we have not been able to get a full context around that the subcommittee provides it for us and has enabled us to make decisions or change directions or to nuance certain programs in a way that I think reflects the needs of the communities expressed through the board. So I found it to be very valuable. I have yet to find or experience a situation where the board was getting in my way. I found quite the opposite. And as I look at other things that we need to work on in the district, I see it as a resource that I'm excited to be able to use. Hey, I don't know everything around this particular issue. Can you provide me some feedback?
Yes, in that vein, I would encourage the administration that if you feel frustrated by these committee meetings, we are all new at this. I mean, this is a new concept for us, and I'm guessing for all of you as well, that please don't be shy about telling us that, hey, this or that has got to change because you're slowing us down. No one will be hurt.
Or you're putting too much on our plate and we can't possibly hope to get it done in the time allotted. But, you guys have lives. I mean, as long as you're sleeping at least 3 or 4 hours, we're okay with that.
I have a couple of themes that kind of came out that if we could just talk for a couple minutes. The agenda planning, there was some discussion in terms of how we plan agendas. And I know, Chris, I think one of the comments that you made at the beginning was kind of talking about, we're the sounding board to provide the community values and the input. But I think it's kind of, in my head anyway, there's kind of 2 parts. One is the sounding board role, but then the other one is the board kind of giving some direction. And I think that comes out with the performance indicators, and it comes out in, long-term aspirational things that we want to do with facilities, that we want to do with curriculum. So I think it's kind of 2 parts. And I think that's why it's a great model that we have a board member and a cabinet member kind of teamed up. But how do you, maybe if anybody wants to comment on agenda planning, how the agendas look, too big, too small, too much administration, not enough board, too much board, not enough administration. I've heard some, I have my own impressions, but I'd be interested in hearing from other people on that topic.
Personally, I think they're good because, at least in the 2 committees I serve on, the agendas are primarily driven by the administration because you all work this job way more than 40 hours a week. So you know what your priorities are. You know where you need to get to and in what time frame. And I think the items you put on it is where you're looking for community input and where the board can help steer direction. And if you have, 2 alternatives or 3 alternatives, you can get our input into which one you could pursue. And I think that's good. We do tend to discuss, our discussions tend to go on longer than we anticipate, right? But I don't know if that is the nature of school boards, the nature of the 7 people that we have on this board. I can't tell you that. But I think if we can discipline ourselves into having a little bit more terse discussion, everybody benefits.
I have a crazy idea. and this is something that from my old business days, is that we estimate time. So when we put it on an agenda, we estimate that we're going to spend 30 minutes, and we kind of just toss it out there and say, here, we've got 6 things on the agenda, or we've got 4 things on the agenda. This is a 10-minute update. This is a 30-minute, this is a discussion, or characterize the agenda items differently. This is an update where it's the administrator providing information, or this is something that we expect to get into the meat of it to figure it out. Just as an idea. I think for me personally, even looking at our board agendas, it's always more helpful to have more information about what the intention is for having that item on the agenda. Is this something where we're looking just for some general direction? Do we need a decision? If we need a decision, when do we need a decision? Those are some things that have been tossing around in my head.
I've been very comfortable with the agenda setting for the committees that I've been on, because I feel like it's been a collaborative effort of staff and board members coming together on what needs to be done. I especially like the way the finance committee did it and said, okay, we're going to do this in this meeting, and we want to do this, and the goals and things that need. When you say they need to do things, they need to accomplish things from an administrative perspective, not a policy perspective. And I just wanted to clarify that. I understood that's what you meant. I just wanted to clarify that one. But I'm very comfortable with that. As far as time constraints, I think that could be part of that agenda setting. Say, let's do that. I'm going to bring it up. The idea that, Maria, you were right. Policy is huge. It takes a lot of time. It's the exception to the rule that you stay out of the details, because it is the board's policy that's being written. It seems to take a lot of time, and I think we've given short shrift to some of those other functions, and I'd suggested in my comments moving things to the other committee. I don't want to dump on another committee that I'm not a member of, but but the idea is, but I thought my other point there was it really ties in well to this performance indicators function, in that you're reviewing it from all levels. And I don't know if that's a better idea to intentionally keep those 2 items separate, in separate roles, or to bring them together because, there's a whole unity of purpose there that gets addressed. I don't know. I'm just wondering what your committee thinks now that I threw it out there.
I can only speak for myself. I don't want to speak for my performance management committee members. They can speak for, actually Karen is not here, and she's the chair of the committee that you're talking about. And so I think before we would make a recommendation and make a change, I think Karen should be involved in that discussion as well. Policy is huge. For the 2 years that I was policy chair, we were rewriting the policy manual, and it never really goes away. And I will also say, with the new administration and a new cabinet, there's a lot of policy discussions that take place and policy interpretation. And I think it's still a workload, but I think it probably will taper off. My projection could be totally wrong. But I do think that I agree, and I think Mrs. Stufen, in speaking for her just for a minute, she did indicate that, her feelings were similar, and that that the team wasn't able to commit as much time to board improvement of our board processes and the community engagement piece in particular as she would like. I don't want to purport to give the answer to that. I agree with you, though. I think there's a lot on that committee's plate, and how we resolve that is something, if other board members want to chime in.
One way we could do it is, okay, so the committee is board improvement and policy. We could alternate. We tried to do this last month, and it was because of me. But anyway, you alternate. One meeting you start with board improvement. The next month you start with policy, and then we could try that for a few months, see how it goes. Or ask Karen too what she thinks about changing, moving board improvement to the performance management committee.
I say within performance management, if we're trying to adhere to kind of our unofficial 9 o'clock deadline, there's not a ton of extra space there either. And so I think we just collectively have to figure out how to divide it up. I like Shannon's idea of kind of alternating meetings and seeing if that fits, or carving out a separate policy group, but we don't want to add any more time, and we've already got a ton of time there. But and we're in the same spot in performance management, though, where there's a lot of discussion between now and kind of June, which is the target date for performance indicators. So there's going to be a lot of stuff pushing around. There's also with PIRA and a lot of the stuff that's going on there. I mean, we're spending a lot of time on that, but I hear you. I mean, there's no easy answer, but right, board improvement is still an important thing not to get lost on.
Oh, Maria, you raise a good point that there are some reasons why it looks like it's going to taper off, and I'd say hold tight, let's see how it goes. Policy will subside a bit, and the points you raised about the reasons why are good ones. And no, there were things I didn't see, so appreciate that.
Hey, one other topic that I wanted to address that I do have some feelings about our minutes. I think we've improved in terms of our minutes and getting, we talked about the timing. I think we probably still need to figure out, and if we plan for next fiscal year, we'll do a little bit better of planning meetings ahead of time. But I do want to encourage us, and I don't know if it's the chairs that need to own this, but at one point there was a perception that I think we all agreed the decisions aren't made in committee. Decisions are made at the full board table with all 7 board members. And so I think, one idea that we had kicked around was coming up with kind of a format for, okay, we have consensus on this. This is a recommendation that should come back to the full board. It's almost a practice that we use, that we say, okay, on this particular agenda item, we've reached consensus on this. This is something that the full board needs to do. We did that regularly with policy. We'd churn on policy, and then we'd say, okay, it's ready to go. And then it comes back to the full board. And maybe either the board chair or not the committee chair or the minute taker, we could really work on teasing out to make sure that we say, this is a recommendation that needs to go back to the full board. We could get it to the board president and to the superintendent, who's sitting through all of our lovely committee meetings, and just make sure that we're very distinct and clear that these are decisions that need to be made by the full board. And I think it also helps raise visibility and transparency. You look at the committee meeting notes and you see what's going to be coming up on a future board agenda. How do the committee chairs, or how do you all feel about putting a little more structure in place in wrapping up consensus and recommendations to the full board?
I tried to do that when I wrote the minutes for last week's meeting on January 4th for curriculum. At the end of each agenda item, this will be a first reading for a policy, or this will happen in fall of 2012. So I think it's good to put dates or timing for each agenda item. It will help others that aren't part of the committee.
The last thing that I teased out, or I'm sorry, Jim, did you want to? The last thing that I teased out was there were some comments about other board members attending committee meetings that they are not a member of that committee. Does anybody want to comment on that while I take a drink?
Anybody mind if when others?
Yeah, no, I think that's the point. I mean, if you want to take another evening and spend it with us, we're more than happy to have you.
Except if too many board members then start going to the meetings, which I guess it won't happen because there's just so many meetings.
Right. I mean, that was a concern that David pointed out. We don't want to get into a point where we're having committees as a whole, within committees. But I mean, my 2 cents is, if you want to come join us, please do.
Okay. Seeing as this is, are there any other questions, comments on committees? We're thumbs up. We're feeling pretty good. We're still learning, improving. Sorry. If any members of the public would like to come up, I have a question. Jan, do you want to come up? Questions or comments about the committee structure?
I'm Jan Dorner. I'm speaking for myself and not for any organization. As you all know, I've been coming to school board meetings for 20 plus years. 20 years ago, there were committees, and the committees probably went away maybe 15, 14 years ago, except for the policy committee. And I'm speaking what I want to bring up is specifically about what Mr. McDonough brought up, which was to invite the community to be involved. I did go to one committee meeting, and I tried to sit away. It was set up as a big round table, and I tried to sit, kind of off to the side, and was encouraged, no, come on, sit up here, come on. In all the committee meetings and all the school board meetings that I have attended, I was never that intimately involved. I'm not sure that is appropriate at a committee meeting. I think maybe you have to set up at every policy committee meeting that I went to for the last 20 years, it was the same as any board meeting. The community was not allowed to speak except during public comment. And I participated in this committee meeting probably more than I've ever participated in a committee meeting before. I enjoyed it. I'm not saying it's wrong, but perhaps you need to set some rules up.
Jan, could you just kind of lay out what you think might be a productive or appropriate role for public in a committee meeting? Just, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I can't.
Okay.
No, I can't.
Right.
I can offer one guideline that all of our board meetings are board meetings, they are meetings in public, they are not public meetings, right? So we conduct our business in the light of day, in the view of the community. Our regularly scheduled board and business and workshop meetings are televised and stored, and our meetings are always required to be open to the public so that they can see our deliberative process, what we're considering as we're making decisions, and then what decisions we make. So, and we can talk about including, we are required to offer public comment at the beginning of even committee meetings. So we do have that opportunity for the community to be engaged. We could have a discussion about treating it like a workshop, kind of what we're doing here. And that's something that we could entertain.
That seems to be the most logical thing to me, is do in a workshop format where we bring up the topic. The members of the public who are at the meeting can comment. We can actually interact with them. We can discuss more and give the public the opportunity to comment again. At least the committees I am, my attitude is we value the public's input into our decision. After all, we are Elmhurst Community Unit School District. We're looking for that community input, in my opinion. But I think Mrs. Dorner's comments are well taken in that maybe we need to make that process a little more formal.
I think you're right. I think it's fine. We don't have a problem with Mrs. Dorner. She is wonderful and observes our school board and reports back to the community, and she's pretty level-headed and isn't out of control. But if we found somebody that tried to usurp meetings and control the time, I think that's what we're trying to make sure that we're getting our business done. I think that's the sentiment which is behind that. So how do you feel about if we were to adopt that kind of an approach where we used a workshop kind of an approach? Is that something that we could kind of have a consensus around and try that?
Maria, I think it's important to have a format that allows two-way communication with the public. I think it can be limited, it can be structured, it can be organized so that it doesn't dominate. We were elected to, make these decisions and take these votes. But I also think there's a resource there in the two-way communications that shouldn't be lost. But I agree that it should be regularized, it should be formalized, it should be controlled, because it really could get out of control. Any
other topics and committees? Are we ready to move on? Okay.
Let me just, before we move on, I just want to thank the Board of Education and my cabinet. It's one more evening away from family on this, and it's been a big commitment and dedication to everyone concerned. So I want to thank you for taking the time to do that. And hopefully, it sounds like it has been helpful. It has moved the district forward. And given that and the board's commitment to stay with it, just thank you for that time commitment. So we appreciate that. Thanks.
And thank you, Mr. Pernod, because Mr. Pernod does sit through every committee meeting, and we can be long-winded as we are right now. So I'm going to go ahead and move us along in the agenda. And actually, a format of the agenda has changed a little bit this evening based on some of the rumblings and some of the feedback that we've taken. We've actually moved. We used to give board committee reports during board communication at the end of the meeting, at the very latest, and we're moving them up earlier in the meeting. So next on the agenda is board committee reports. We have 3 committees that have met since the last board meeting, and we asked the committee chair to give a brief update and update our fellow board members on what discussions are in play and any recommendations that come forth. So we'll start with curriculum and instruction, and that would be Mrs. Ebner.
Okay, there were 5 agenda items for our meeting last Wednesday for curriculum and instruction, January 4th. And the first thing we did was review school improvement plans. Last month, we approved York's school improvement plan, and this month we reviewed all the other schools, their school improvement plans. And there are just a couple top-line items I wanted to point out is the committee agreed that the emphasis will shift from ISAT goals to MAP goals. So we'll be talking more about MAP in the future. That's a type of test like the ISAT, a little bit different though. It's more about student growth. And also we talked about district performance indicators. I brought this up earlier in the meeting. And those will be developed throughout the district, and specifically for curriculum and instruction, there'll be academic district performance indicators. And after those are finalized in June, the school improvement plans may be revised to reflect or be aligned with the district performance indicators. And then there'll be more consistency among the school plans. The other agenda item we reviewed is policy 6300. That's coming up later in the agenda. So I'm not going to say much about that, but there's 3 things and maybe Charles, you can chime in too. We talked about science requirement, computer literacy requirement, and reducing our elective requirement. And we're going to hold on those 3 items. If you want to say something, feel free. Would you like to, or?
I think we thought that those were both ideas that needed more study, and we wanted to emphasize, we believe there's a strong need in the district for high-quality planning to ensure quality implementation. We wanted to make sure we covered our bases.
Right. Okay, so those 3 items we're going to do some more planning around, and then the revised policy on the agenda are for 4 other items about attaining junior status, attaining senior status, and removing the service learning requirement from policy. We also talked about class sizes. It was just a basic discussion of where we are with class sizes, what our targets are based on budget reductions last year, and just talked about the pros and cons of higher class sizes versus lower class sizes. So there was really no recommendation at this time for the full board regarding class size. I think that's going to be an ongoing discussion. And also the administration will analyze, it's ongoing. They'll be analyzing staffing at the high school level in core and elective classes. And it was just a nice discussion about, what the district thinks and board thinks about class sizes with no recommendation yet. And then, Charles, you gave a curriculum and instruction update. And if you just want to give a couple of top line, or I can go through it, that's fine too. Me? Okay. Yeah. We talked about, summer school planning is underway. The Institute Day is next Tuesday. And ISAT testing preparation is underway. So it's just kind of Charles's main priorities for now. And I already mentioned these district performance indicators. It's really how we're going to measure ourselves, and they'll be academic in the curriculum committee, and as I said, there'll be a rough draft for in March and then finalized in June. It's really, okay, so how do we measure ourselves? That's the indicator, and we'll figure out where we're at, our benchmark, where we want to be as our benchmark, and then set goals to meet our benchmark where we want to be. So that's all in the works right now, and you'll be getting more information on that as the months go on. And that was it.
Does anybody have any questions for curriculum? Okay, Shannon, you're going to get the microphone again. Mrs. Stufen is home this evening ill, so I'd asked Mrs. Ebner to give us the Board Improvement Policy Committee update.
Okay, this one's going to be really fast because most of our meeting on December 21st was for policy, and those are on the agenda today. So I don't need to say much about policy. There are just a few other items we discussed at that meeting on the 21st. Our PTA Community Forum, that was November 1st. We received questions from the community, and Malia Smith has answers to all those questions that are posted on our website. And we also talked about our vision and mission statements, and that's why that item came to the full board meeting today. So I don't need to review that again. And then the other item we discussed was our committee structure, and that, again, came to the full board tonight, which we've already discussed. So this one's very quick.
And Mr. Collins, would you like the Finance and Operations Committee update?
There are two committee meetings that we've had since. I'll review one, and Mr. McDonough will review the other, and I guess we can go in chronological order. The first was November 28th at Lincoln Elementary School, and let me preface this by giving a little background. About 11 months ago, the previous board heard a 10-year facilities plan, which involved a plan to invest about $4 million in Lincoln School's structure and particularly its building envelope over the next 10 years. The question was asked at that time, if you're going to invest, and I point out Lincoln School is 95 years old. At least its oldest section has had many additions since. Accessibility is challenged in many cases, and if it were to have to stand up to today's accessibility codes, it would not fare well. It is circuitous in getting around the building. Drain pipes from the gutters run through the walls intentionally, and that was just the design of the original building. So the question was asked, if we're going to invest $4 million over the next 10 years in that building, what would it cost to replace that building? So with the change in administrations and things, that got put to the wayside. And so we brought it up again on November 28th. We had present staff from the White Architects and Mr. Hsu, who's our Director of Buildings and Facilities. So we took a tour of the school, and White presented three alternatives. Two were very similar. Plan A and Plan B would involve renovating and some of the existing structure, certainly utilizing the 2006 classroom additions that were put on the school. One involved building a school going west, and the other involved building a school going south, keeping the students in the school but rotating them over a 2-year period while construction was done, somewhat similar to what was done at Hawthorne. Estimated total cost of both of those projects was identical at about $19.5 million. Plan C involved basically scraping the gym off of Lincoln School, building to the north on the ball field that is to the north of Lincoln School, a brand new school, completely, not utilizing any of the existing Lincoln structure. That would take about a year to do. Students would not be disrupted, and the estimated cost for that was about $20 million. So, let me emphasize that no decisions have been made. All we're looking for is a long-term facilities plan for Lincoln School, and so that we can make a logical decision of, do we invest $4 million in that school to do the structural work needed to keep it safe and intact? Or do we have a plan at some point in the future that would involve the replacement of Lincoln School and therefore investing far less in the existing structure with the idea that we reconstruct at a later date? That plan is still in process. There is no decisions to be made in terms of time frame. We're just gathering data at this point. There will be more discussions within the Finance Committee about that, and at some point in the future, we'll come to the board with the alternatives and a proposed recommendation. But that we want a plan that is well vetted, well thought out, and that's going to take a while to do. So with that, we had another Finance Committee meeting.
On December 17th, City Manager Jim Grabowski and City Director of Finance Tom Trozine came to the Finance Committee to discuss a couple of issues related to tax increment financing. The first issue was the obligations of the parties and the way forward under the 2004 intergovernmental agreement between the city and the school district regarding TIF 1 and the future of TIF 1. The discussion was very open. It was direct. It was both parties expressing their understandings of the language of the document and the commitments that were in that were made in the formation of that document. It was agreed that there is an obligation for the city to pay surplus, and we were going to jointly investigate the outlines of how that will be performed and give a little bit of progress under, I believe, sections 4 and 5 provide for meetings, communications, and shared plans. What we agreed to do was to sit down and share projections and expectations further moving forward. The date for the earliest that surplus would be payable would be, I believe it's the end of 2013. Chris, was that the answer to that question? 2014. It was the 2013-2014 fiscal year of the city. Is that right? Well, whatever the detail, it's about 2 years away. And there's time to get together to see what this TIF district what involves with completing the development plan in the TIF district and the amount of money it will require and the surplus that would be paid to all the taxing districts, not just the school district. We also discussed briefly the future TIF proposals that the city has been investigating. Mr. Grabowski stated that the consultant's report and recommendations will be coming in a few weeks, and that when they are introduced, it will share the report with the district, and we'll meet with the city at that time to discuss the results of that report. The discussion on that was brief in that there was not the report before us, so there was not a lot to talk about in that respect. Have I adequately captured the discussion? Is there something else you think should be added? Okay.
The only thing I'll add is in the discussion around the upcoming TIF, we were able to put out on the table kind of the desire to work together in district's expectations as it pertains to what the proposal is and protecting, the taxpayers that are paying for the education in Elmhurst. And, when we're talking about, porting, and that's probably going to be an issue with this if it comes back with porting. I'm trying to think of some of the other issue that we threw out on the table. But, it was a good discussion around coming to a mutually agreeable solution to this, which the city gets the economic growth, and, we're representing the taxpayers that we represent. So.
Right. I think we discussed alternatives to and modifications to, the standard traditional TIF that would turn it into a collaborative and cooperative development idea that the district could be behind with the city.
Any other questions or comments on any of the committee reports? Seeing none, we'll move on with our agenda. Next on our agenda, we have the superintendent's agenda. We have a consent agenda this evening. Typically, we save consent agendas for business meetings, but we have a couple things. So I would accept a motion.
I move to accept the items on the consent agenda. Is that good enough?
Thank you. The items on this evening's consent agenda are a personnel report, approval of revised policy 7:310, restrictions on publications including electronic materials, and approval of revised policy 6300, graduation requirements, first reading. These are just basic wording changes. And in the first one and in the second one, we were required by the state to identify what the definition of a junior and a senior is. And so those are just some minor wording changes that we are adopting. We are making changes to policy, so I believe that we need a voice vote because we need a majority for policy. So, right.
Yes.
So, Mrs. Walsh, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Bloom?
Yes.
Mrs. Ebner?
Yes.
Mrs. Durrani is absent. Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Ms. Stufen is absent. Mr. McDonough?
Yes.
Thank you. That's 5 yeses, 2 absent. That motion carries. Next on our agenda, we have the superintendent's agenda. Sorry, the board committees took up so much time. We pushed you to the end of the night. We've got 2 action items. Mr. Pernod, actually, if it's okay, I'm going to toss these over to our policy guru, Mr. McDonough. Mrs. Stufen is not here. And so if you could just, we have first approval of a new policy, 5:125, electronic media usage and conduct. We're presenting this policy for first reading. Our practice is to present it for first reading. If there's any questions, discussions, and then we'll bring it back at a later meeting for second reading, and that's when it's actually adopted as board policy. Could you give us a recap? I'll take a motion. How's that?
I move we approve new board policy 5:125, electronic media usage and conduct.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Mr. McDonough, do you want to give us a recap?
We subscribe to the PRESS service part of the ISBA. I don't know what the acronym is for, but they provide updates of policy, recommended updates of policy. In this case, with the explosion of electronic media and its impact on our school environments and the education system, it was determined that a provision found in the employment section of the policy manual would be needed to govern use of electronic media in the school environment by staff. There's another provision in the education sections that deals with its role in the education process. I'm sorry, I'm going to need a little help, Dave, about the requirement that a security policy be in place for the E-rate. But is that impacted, or is that the other one?
Actually, that's a different policy.
Okay,
yeah.
I apologize. I'm sorry about that. I'm covering. I wasn't anticipating to speak about this, but I did help write it. But there is a need to state some parameters as to how staff would use electronic media, both for social purposes and for professional purposes. The idea that was in the original press version was to restate obligations that are stated elsewhere in the policy. We took pen to it, we simplified it, and just simply allowed it to reinforce what's already stated in these other other sections regarding professional conduct of the staff, regarding non-interference of the use of electronic media for social purposes. Was there something else that was in this? Okay, I think I pretty much covered it.
Are there any questions or comments about this policy? Okay, the actual language of the policy is published on Board Docs, our document management system that we use for board meetings, so anyone is able to look at the text of this. And if there are questions or concerns or clarifications, you can feel free to contact, either email to the superintendent or send a message to the Board of Education. But this, I will go ahead and ask Mrs. Walsh to call the roll, and we will pass this for first reading tonight. Mrs. Walsh?
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. McDonough?
Yes.
Ms. Ebner?
Yes.
Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Mr. Bloom?
Yes.
Mrs. Geroni and Ms. Stufen are absent.
Thank you. There are 5 yeses, 2 absent. That motion carries. The second revised policy is about gifts to the district, policy 8:80. And again, Mr. McDonough, did you want to give a recap of what we're looking at in terms of this is a revision and what changes are being made here?
This is an issue that arises because we're in a great place. We have a great community that has stepped up. They're caring, they're dedicated, they've shown a willingness to contribute and improve our community and the environment for our kids, our learning environment for our kids. So first, let me say we're very fortunate and grateful to have received numerous donations from various organizations and other parties. Since our discussion of donations at the board meeting back on October 25th, the Committee on Board Improvement and Policy has been looking at the district policy on the acceptance of gifts by the district. We discussed not only the things that were discussed at that meeting, such as equity and correlating the policy or correlating contributions with the goals and objectives of our strategic and facilities plans, but also the wide array of issues and considerations that are in the policy manual that could possibly be impacted by donations. When we reviewed the current policy, we determined that there really wasn't anything that big that needed fixing. Just a little adjustment of the language to clarify some of the things that it said, albeit in a less succinct manner. There were some extraneous issues regarding marketing and messaging that we felt were more appropriately addressed in other places and would need more study. So we took those out and we simplified it with the view that the policy on the acceptance of gifts should conform to and promote all of the policies that define the total educational mission, not just those that we discussed on October 25th. But we did decide that, given that discussion, it was necessary to state more explicitly what the policy already said, albeit in less certain terms, that gifts accepted by the district are accepted without legal conditions. And in making those revisions, we decided that we needed to clearly state to this community our commitment that the district intends to continue its existing practice and custom that donated resources should be assigned to and used in the location for which they were intended by the donors. But that being said, in the unlikely event that there is ever a need to reallocate district resources among our schools and between our students in order to keep our commitment to educate every child in an equitable manner, we need to make those decisions in a context, in an environment that does not involve the risk of a lawsuit. Accordingly, we needed to clearly state that these gifts will not be accepted with legal conditions because we need to have those discussions here in the boardroom and not in a courtroom with lawyers billing us for their time. And that's just simply being a good steward of the taxpayers' property. So those were our thoughts on the gift policy.
Any board member comments or questions? Okay. I need a motion.
I move that we approve a first reading of revised policy 8:80, gifts to the district.
There's a second. Mrs. Ebner seconds. Mrs. Walsh, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mrs. Ebner?
Yes.
Mr. Bloom?
Yes.
Mrs. Droney is absent. Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Mr. McDonough?
Yes.
And Ms. Stufen is absent.
Thank you, Mrs. Walsh. That's 5 yeses, 2 absent. That motion carries. Next on our agenda is our upcoming meetings. Oh. Yeah, it's at the, I still got it. Yep, thank you. Next on our agenda is upcoming meetings. This Thursday, the Performance Management Committee will be meeting. Thursday, January 19th, the Finance and Operations Committee is meeting. Tuesday, January 24th is the Board of Education business meeting, which is at 7:30. And Wednesday, January 25th, the Board Improvement Policy Committee is meeting. All of our committee meetings, I think, generally now begin at 7, and all of our meetings are here in this building. We do have one action that we are going to take based on closed session. Mr. Collins.
This is a motion coming out of the agreement of the board from closed session held earlier this evening. The motion is that the Board of Education approve to uphold the hearing officer's factual findings that student VB does not reside within the Jackson Elementary School's attendance boundaries on a regular fixed basis, but instead lives within Lincoln Elementary School boundaries. As a result, I move that student VB be allowed to finish the 2011-2012 school year at Jackson Elementary and return to her home school of Lincoln Elementary for the 2012-2013 school year.
Thank you. Can I have a second? Mrs. Ebner? This requires a voice vote, so Mrs. Walsh, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mrs. Ebner?
Yes.
Mrs. Droney is absent. Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Ms. Stufen is absent. Mr. Bloom?
Yes.
Mr. McDonough?
Yes.
Thank you. That's 5 yeses, 2 absent. That motion carries. Last on our agenda is board communications. Are there any board members who have anything that they would like to share with the rest of the board? Seeing none, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Any seconds?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Don't forget to say yes. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you for your attendance.